welcome back. This has been fantastic. I enjoyed the first session so much. It's good to be able to see you again and look forward to going ahead and continuing on with this discussion. I was very impressed to start with when you represented ASHRAE at COP26 in Glasgow. Mm-hmm. And then, and that was in 21, I think it was. And then just earlier this month, you were over in Dubai at COP28. Right. Have you seen a noticeable difference in the mindset or opinion of people who attended those or just sensed those?
Yeah, the COP meetings are really interesting because you're so isolated from the people who actually make all of the commitments for the countries. There's a lot of side events that happen and a lot of knowledge that transfers. I think I'm seeing more urgency. Good. Because, I think there, and maybe as it's developed over time, there was more doubters, if you will, about climate change. But I went to a really good session at COP28 that was put on by the people from the Pacific Islands.
Oh, really?
And they're talking about how much their islands are almost destroyed from climate change. And, we in the U.S., we're a little insulated and we don't see what the rest of the world is dealing with. If you go to Alaska, they know it's happening, right? If you go to different places in the U.S. that are on the coast, you can see it. Alaska, they're like, you can see everything happening there with the glaciers and everything. But if you go to Wisconsin or if you go to, places in the middle of the country, they don't have the whole climate events a lot of times that you see in the rest of the world. So it's getting people to be more aware that it's affecting people. It may not be affecting you, but it's affecting a lot of people.
At COP28, you were on the panel Design Thinking, Global Standards, and Integrative Solutions for a Net Zero Built Environment. And I was impressed that was organized by the American Institute of Architects, ASHRAE, the mm-hmm. Australian Forest Products Association, Swedish Environmental Research Institute, and the Royal Institute of British Architects. Based on your conversations and observations, do you think the U.S. is ahead of, even with, or behind other countries and areas of the world when it comes to decarbonization and adapting to avoid climate change?
It's funny when you go to these COP events, there's a lot of U.S. shaming that goes on. Really? We have a very high carbon footprint per person. Yeah. Pretty much the highest in the world. So there's a lot of, the U.S. is hugely contributing to climate change, to carbon emissions with our carbon footprint. It's a little embarrassing, actually, at how much we just don't seem to care sometimes. I think there's a lot of rhetoric that happens at these COP events. There's not as much action that you see out of them. And I don't think the U.S. is ahead. Europe is ahead of us. We've started late. We're catching up fast because we're moving fast, but we've started late. So I was able to see Al Gore speak about it. I was able to see John Kerry speak about greenhouse gas emissions, and there's a lot of really good conversation about it, but at the end of the day, it comes down to action, and the action is what I think is missing.
COP28 included the world's first global stocktake. Mm-hmm. And I had done quite a bit of reading about that because I had written an article about it not too long ago and didn't know what it meant to start with, but it defined as looking at everything related to where the world stands on climate action and support, identifying the gaps, and working together to chart a better course forward to accelerate climate action. I know the stocktake was released back in September ahead of time. How were the results accepted by the COP28 attendees? And was there a lot of discussion about us having a long way to go?
Oh, yes, we have a long way to go. And there was a lot of discussion about the fact that we have a long way to go. And like I said, there's a lot of talk at these COP events. There's the action, it's interesting because this was in Dubai and the UAE is a oil-rich country, right? So the goal, what a lot of people wanted to see was a phase down of fossil fuels, a commitment to a phase down plan of fossil fuels. They had some loose rhetoric about reducing fossil fuels at the end of COP and in their summary, but there was not a defined phase down. And so, that was, I think, disappointing for a lot of people, because we have, this is a time for action. Okay. We're running out of time. If you if you believe everything you read, and I've read a lot about this in terms of trying to keep to 1.5 degrees C global temperature rise, where, they're saying now there's a 66% chance we will go over the 1.5 degrees C by 2027. So, and then it will go back and forth and continue to rise. But so yes, the global stocktake was discussed, and I'm sure some good things came out of all of that. But the biggest thing that didn't come out was a phase out of fossil fuels.
It's interesting reading a lot of commentary about what has happened during that day of COP28. And, you get it from both sides. But I read an AP article titled 5 Reasons Why COP28, the UN Climate Talks, are worth your attention. And it says basically they're important because, 1, they exert peer pressure. 2, they produce clear goals and frame debates. 3, they foster slow but solid progress. 4, and there's no other option.
Right. We got to work together as a country. It's just like working together as an industry, right? We've got to work together as the world with all the countries. Yeah. There was a lot of focus on the really big polluter companies of which countries, of which we're one.
Yeah.
Providing compensation for the countries that are not.
Read that.
Right. So there was a huge focus there on at COP28 in terms of putting money in, funds in to help the countries that are really struggling. I think that's a short-term discussion, because I think that, at this point, blame is not going to help anything, but we've got to move forward with actions. So it's just every year. I mean, in COP26, there was a lot of protesters, like Greta Thunberg was there. They were marching in the streets about having these meetings and having no action. It was interesting in Dubai. I didn't see any protesters, and I don't know if that's because they didn't let them in, or they've just given up and said this is just a bunch of talking heads and nothing's going to happen. But it was a big difference there in what you saw in Glasgow from what I saw in Dubai.
I need to ask your advice as well and get your opinion. I've been invited to speak at a panel for the Corps of Engineers and the Navy in D.C. next month regarding designing and constructing net zero and sustainable facilities. Based on your experience traveling the world and speaking with people who focus on the topic, do you have a recommendation as to what I should tell them?
Yeah, I mean, you should tell them that the goal. So ASHRAE's position is that all new buildings need to be net zero by 2030, and then and that's in operational carbon, and then everything needs to be embodied carbon and operational carbon clear by 2050. So. That's ASHRAE's position, and I agree with that. One of the things that came out of COP28, which is kind of a rallying cry, is it is triple renewables and double efficiency. So that was a big item that has been quoted several times, which I'll be quoting also in my speech in Chicago, about tripling renewables and doubling efficiency. So if we can just get people to think about that, to think about how they can triple the use of renewables and double their energy efficiency, we'll go a long way towards decarbonizing.
That's wonderful. Ginger, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been fantastic. I wish you the very best success in the rest of your term as the president of ASHRAE. You're doing an outstanding job.
Thank you very much, Bill. It's good to talk to you.